The air in the Aegis Station armory was sterile, recycled, and smelled faintly of ozone and weapons-grade lubricant. It was a clean, orderly Navy-run space where every plasma rifle and pulse grenade was racked with geometric precision. Gunnery Sergeant Eva Rostova's presence was a smudge of grit in this pristine environment. Her gear, laid out on a magnetic workbench, was not new. The carbon fiber case of her rifle was a tapestry of scars, its matte black surface silvered at the edges with years of hard use. The rifle itself, a Nemesis Mach 4, was a custom piece, its lines more brutalist than the sleek ergonomic weapons of the station's Marine detachment. Corporal Marcus Thorne leaned against a rack of shock batons, arms crossed. "Look what the inter-service transfer dragged in," he said, his voice loud enough to carry across the polished deck. His two companions, also Marines, snickered. "That a rifle, Gunny, or a relic you dug up from the Martian boneyards?" Rostova didn't look up. Her focus was on the rifle's bolt assembly. Her hands, wrapped in scarred but steady knuckles, moved with an economy of motion that was almost hypnotic. She slid the bolt into the receiver. The sound it made was not the harsh click of standard-issue hardware, but a deep hydraulic thump like a vault door closing. It was the sound of perfectly machined, hand-lapped steel meeting its housing. A sound of finality. "Heard she was an instructor back on Titan for the last decade," the second Marine, a private named Jiao, whispered. "Probably teaching cadets how to salute." "An instructor," Thorne scoffed, pushing off the rack and sauntering closer. He was young, broad-shouldered, with the easy arrogance of a man who had only ever known success in simulations. "They send us a teacher for a live fire extermination. What's she gonna do, lecture the target to death?" Rostova picked up her scope. It was as long as a man's forearm, a heavy cylinder of optics and sensors that bore no manufacturer's mark. She began calibrating it, her eye pressed to the rubberized cup. The data-rich overlay flickered to life, projecting windage Coriolis effect for the station's artificial gravity and a dozen other variables she dismissed with a blink. She was looking at the grain of the far wall, the microscopic stress fractures in the bulkhead, seeing the world in a way they couldn't comprehend. "Hey, I'm talking to you, Gunny," Thorne pressed, now standing directly over her workbench. He gestured at her rifle. "Seriously, what's the range on that thing? You planning on shooting our target from here?" She finally looked up. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky, pale and cold and etched with fine lines at the corners. They held no anger, no annoyance. They held nothing but a profound, weary stillness. She looked at Thorne, then through him, as if he were just another environmental factor to be calculated and dismissed. "It's adequate," she said. Her voice was low, with a faint, unplaceable accent buried under years of military monotone. The simple, non-confrontational reply seemed to infuriate Thorne more than any insult could have. He saw it as the weakness of a woman past her prime, out of her depth. He sneered, "Adequate, right. Well, you keep playing with your museum piece, Grandma. Try not to strain yourself. The real work is for us." He turned and walked away, his cronies following like pilot fish. Rostova watched them go, her expression unchanged. Then she returned to her work. She loaded a single heavy-caliber tungsten round into the breech, her thumb pressing it down until it seated with another quiet, perfect thump. She did not load the magazine. One round was enough for now. The armory door hissed open, and a young tech specialist, Sergeant Kaido Tanaka, entered. He gave Rostova a wide berth, his eyes flicking nervously from her scarred rifle to the smirking Marines across the room. He saw the friction, the dismissal, and wanted no part of it. He hurried to his console and pretended to be busy. Rostova paid him no mind. Her world had shrunk to the cold steel beneath her hands and the silent, patient weight of the bullet in the chamber. The mockery was just noise, like wind, and she had learned long ago how to use the wind. The briefing room was a hemisphere of holographic light. At its center, a three-dimensional model of the target spun slowly, a sprawling refinery complex on the barren moon of Tartarus. Admiral Vance stood before it, a ramrod-straight figure in a crisp black Navy duty uniform. His face was sharp, angular, and his eyes held the cold certitude of a man who had never had an order questioned. The target is Kalen, Vance began, his voice clipping through the silence. A former Alliance warlord turned pirate king. He's repurposed this decommissioned helium-3 refinery into a fortress. Red threat indicators pulsed across the hologram. The facility is protected by military-grade energy shields, active counter-electronic warfare suites, and a battalion of well-armed mercenaries. Orbital bombardment is not an option. A frontal assault would be suicidal. He gestured, and the hologram zoomed in, highlighting a series of maintenance tunnels and exhaust vents. Therefore, our approach will be surgical. SEAL Team Gamma, led by Lieutenant Commander Phillips, will perform a high-altitude, low-opening insertion here, a green arrow appeared, and infiltrate through this primary coolant conduit. Simultaneously, our cyber warfare unit will launch a coordinated attack to create a momentary flicker in their shield grid, giving Gamma the window they need. It was a clean, elegant technological solution, a plan conceived in a sterile command center for a war to be fought by proxy, by drones and algorithms. The Marines, including Thorne, nodded in appreciation. It was their language. Once inside, Vance continued, Gamma will proceed to the command hub and neutralize Kalen. Mission is capture or kill. Preference is kill. We want this cancer excised. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. To support Gamma's exfiltration, we will require overwatch. A sniper position will be established on this ridge. He indicated a jagged line of rocks overlooking the refinery, over a kilometer away. It was an afterthought, a minor detail in his grand technological symphony. Who is our designated marksman for this operation? Rostova stood. Gunnery Sergeant Rostova, sir. Vance's eyes settled on her. He scanned her from head to toe, his expression a mixture of surprise and disapproval. He noted the age in her face, the lack of polished deference in her posture. His gaze fell to her tack vest, which was partially unzipped against the stuffy heat of the briefing room. On the dark gray inner lining, sewn with neat, tight stitches, was a small, circular patch. It depicted a stylized white raven, its wings spread on a field of pure black. Vance's face, already stern, hardened into a mask of cold fury. He took 2 steps toward her, his voice dropping to a dangerous hiss. What is that patch, Gunnery Sergeant? The room went dead silent. Every eye was on Rostova. She didn't flinch under his glare. It's an Okhotsk raven, sir. The name meant nothing to the junior personnel, but a few of the older officers shifted uncomfortably. Vance's eyes narrowed. The 7th Special Reconnaissance Group was decommissioned 2 decades ago. Its records were sealed, its existence officially denied. That insignia is forbidden on any uniform, in any context, active or reserve. It represents a history the Alliance has chosen to forget. He pointed a rigid finger at her chest. That badge is banned in my command. Remove it. Rostova's gaze met his. For a moment, a flicker of something ancient and defiant sparked in their depths, but it was gone as quickly as it came. She said nothing. With a slow, deliberate movement, she reached up and zipped her vest to the collar, hiding the patch from view. She did not remove it. The act of quiet defiance enraged Vance. He turned to his aide, Lieutenant Commander Chen, and snapped, "Her file, put it on the main screen." Chen, looking flustered, tapped at his datapad. Rostova's service record appeared on the holographic display. It was sparse, almost insultingly so. Gunnery Sergeant Ava Rostova, basic training Paris Island, various postings, then a long 10-year block simply listed as instructional duties, Titan Training Command. There were no commendations, no combat citations, no history of field operations for the last decade. Vance gestured to the screen with open contempt. This is what they send me? A shooting range instructor? Your file shows no meaningful field experience since the Outer Rim skirmishes. You've been teaching recruits how to zero a scope for 10 years. He looked back at her, his voice dripping with condescension. The conditions on Tartarus are extreme. Corrosive dust, fluctuating magnetic fields, a target over 500 meters away behind energy shielding. Are you absolutely certain you're up to this task, Gunny? The entire room was watching, waiting for her to crumble. Thorne wore a smug, "I told you so" grin. Rostova's expression remained a placid mask. Her hands were loose at her sides. Her breathing was even. She was a rock in the surf of his anger. "I am, sir," she said. Her voice was flat, a simple statement of fact, carrying neither pride nor doubt. Vance stared at her for a long moment, searching for a crack in her composure. He found none. With a dismissive wave of his hand, he turned away. "Fine. Don't get in Gamma Team's way. Chen, continue with the exfil routes." As the briefing continued, Rostova remained standing, a silent, solitary figure. She had been weighed, measured, and found wanting by a man who saw only the surface. She had been dismissed, but the white raven remained hidden beneath her vest, its silent wings spread, waiting for the storm. Tartarus was a vision of industrial hell. The sky was a permanent bruised twilight, choked with rust-colored dust that tasted like metal and acid. The wind howled across the iron-rich plains, a low, mournful sound that vibrated in the bones. Rostova lay prone on the designated ridge, a ghost in a landscape of desolation. Her gilly mantle, woven with strands of local rock and metallic fiber, made her one with the terrain. Below her, 1,620 meters away, the refinery complex squatted like a monstrous armored beast, its pipes and towers breathing plumes of superheated steam into the toxic air. Through her scope, the world was a high-fidelity dance of light and data. She wasn't just looking at the refinery, she was reading it. The shimmer of the shield grid, the heat signatures of patrolling guards, the rhythmic pulse of the primary reactor core. She had been in position for 3 hours, motionless, her body temperature lowered to match the surrounding rock. Her rifle rested on its bipod, its barrel cold to the touch. Patience was her oldest and most trusted weapon. "All call signs, this is Aegis Command. Operation Scythe is a go. Cyber assault commencing in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark." Vance's voice, filtered through her earpiece, was crisp and confident. A low hum vibrated through the rock. On her scope's display, a cascade of garbled code flickered across the refinery's shield frequency. For a second, the shimmering dome over the complex wavered, turning a sickly yellow. "Gamma Lead, we have a window! Go, go, go!" From the bruised sky, 6 black shapes detached themselves, the SEALs of Gamma Team, their stealth suits absorbing the dim light. They fell like stones, deploying their low-altitude grav chutes just moments before impact. They landed silently near the designated coolant conduit. Too silently. The moment their boots touched the ground, the world erupted. Searchlights stabbed through the dust. Automated sentry turrets hidden in the rock face opened up with a storm of plasma fire. It was an ambush. "Contact! Contact! We're compromised! Pinned down at the insertion point!" Lieutenant Commander Phillips's voice was tight with shock and adrenaline. "Heavy fire from elevated positions. We can't—" "Ah!" The sound of an explosion, and then static. Back on Aegis Station, the command center was in chaos. The tactical hologram had turned into a Christmas tree of red icons. The cyber attack had failed. Worse, it had been a trigger. Kalen had been waiting for them. "What is happening?" Vance roared, his voice losing its polished edge. "Where is that fire coming from? I need eyes on target." "Gamma Lead, report." Chen's voice was strained. Philip's voice came back ragged. "Spotters hit. We're blind down here. They've got us in a crossfire. Machine gun nests on the upper gantries, at least 2. Maybe 3. We can't get a lock." On a ridge, Rostova watched the scene unfold with preternatural calm. The panic on the comms was a distant hum. Her world was the circle of her scope. She saw the muzzle flashes, but she wasn't looking at them. She was looking at what was behind them. The heat bloom of the power packs, the subtle distortion in the air caused by the weapon's energy discharge, the faint biosignatures of the operators. The SEALs were trapped in a shallow ravine, their advanced technology useless. The refinery's counter-EW suite had descended like a blanket, turning their high-tech helmet displays into seas of static. Kalen's mercenaries were using the refinery's chaotic structure to their advantage, firing from behind massive pipes through clouds of steam, their positions shielded by layers of metal and machinery. Vance's clean surgical plan had devolved into a bloody primitive firefight, and his team was losing. "Overwatch! Do you have anything?" Vance's voice was a desperate command. "Give me a target! Anything!" Rostova did not reply immediately. Her thumb rested on the comms trigger, but she did not press it. Speaking was a distraction. Breathing was a distraction. There was only the shot. Her breathing slowed to 1 cycle per minute. Her heart rate dropped, each beat a slow, powerful drum against her ribs. She adjusted the scope's focus, dialing it past the visible spectrum and into the quantum resonance frequency. The image shimmered, then resolved. Through the swirling dust and steam, she could now see the faint quantum signatures of the enemy soldiers, their life forces glowing like faint embers in the dark. She saw the primary machine gun nest, 2 operators tucked behind a reinforced shield on a gantry 300 meters above the SEALs. A direct shot was impossible. A thick steam pipe, glowing cherry red, with heat, obstructed the path. Any kinetic round would be deflected or melted. The mercenaries knew it. They were secure. Rostova's mind became a calculator of impossible physics. She tracked the rhythmic venting of a pressure release valve on a different tower to the left of the target. Every 17 seconds it released a jet of supercooled nitrogen gas, a temporary tunnel through the superheated air. She exhaled, her lungs emptying completely. The world stopped. She squeezed the trigger. The nemesis bucked against her shoulder, a solid, powerful recoil that she absorbed into the earth. The tungsten round, magnetically accelerated to hypersonic speed, screamed across the 1,600-meter gap. For a microsecond, it passed through the jet of cold nitrogen, its thermal coating protecting it from shattering. It punched through the weakened magnetic field of the steam pipe's housing and struck the gunner's power pack. The result was not a simple kill. It was a catastrophic detonation. The power pack exploded, engulfing the entire nest in a blue-white plasma fire. The heavy machine gun, ripped from its mount, cartwheeled into the darkness below. The suppression fire on the SEALs vanished from that vector. On the command channel, there was a moment of stunned silence. "Jesus Christ," Phillips breathed. "Where did that come from?" "Overwatch, report your target," Vance demanded, his voice a mix of confusion and hope. Rostova's eye was already moving, acquiring the next target. A sniper, hidden in a crow's nest atop a distillation tower. He was shielded by a thermal cloak, making him invisible to standard infrared. But Rostova wasn't using standard infrared. Her scope picked up the minute gravitational lensing caused by his body mass. He was a ghost, but a ghost with weight. This shot was even more difficult. The wind on Tartarus was a malevolent entity, shifting in unpredictable shears. Her display showed 3 different wind vectors between her and the tower. She didn't fire at the sniper. She fired at a heavy steel support strut 50 meters to his right. Her comms clicked on. Her voice was a low murmur, utterly devoid of emotion. "Target 2, enemy sniper, ricochet solution, stand by." The tungsten round hit the plasteel strut at a precise 17-degree angle. It did not penetrate. Instead, it flattened, shed its outer jacket, and careened sideways, a white-hot spinning disk of metal. It sliced through the air, correcting its trajectory as she had calculated, and hit the sniper's hiding spot. The round punched through the thin metal of the crow's nest and the man behind it, continuing out the other side and disappearing into the night. The enemy sniper's rifle clattered onto the gantry below. "Target neutralized," Rostova stated calmly. In the command center, Admiral Vance stared, speechless, at the tactical display. 2 critical threat icons had just blinked out of existence, eliminated, by shots that his own tactical computers had labeled as statistically impossible. The crisis was far from over. The SEALs were still pinned by a 3rd heavy weapon and a squad of infantry advancing on their position. And worse, a high-frequency jamming signal washed over the comms, cutting them off completely. "We've lost comms," Chen yelled. "Jammer just went active." On the ridge, Rostova saw the source, a directional antenna dish, hastily deployed on a low rooftop. It was protected by the main reactor housing, a dense shell of lead and ceramics. No rifle round could penetrate it. But she wasn't aiming for the dish. She was tracking the thick armored power cable that snaked from the reactor building to the antenna. It ran along the underside of a walkway, exposed for a mere 5-meter stretch. Her mind worked. The cable was shielded. A single round wouldn't be enough. She needed to sever it completely. Her finger moved to the rifle's selector switch, clicking it from single to a setting marked with 3 small dots. A burst fire mode, calibrated for microsecond precision. She centered the crosshairs, exhaled, thump, thump, thump. 3 rounds left the barrel in less than half a second. They traveled in a tight, perfectly spaced line. The first round obliterated the cable's armored sheath. The second, following a millisecond behind, severed the power conduits within. The third, arriving before the cable had time to fall, vaporized the remaining connections. Sparks showered the walkway. The jamming antenna went dead. Comms crackled back to life. "Repeat, we are taking effective fire from the main gate. We need—" Phillips's voice cut back in, clear as a bell. "Comms are back. What the hell is going on?" "Overwatch, this is Aegis." Vance's voice was tight, strained. "Report." Rostova was already scanning for the infantry squad. She found them, using the flaming wreckage of the first gun nest for cover and concealment. 10 of them, moving fast. Her voice came over the net, a calm, lethal whisper in the storm of battle. "Gamma Lead, this is Overwatch. You have a 10-man squad advancing on your left flank, using wreckage for cover. I'm suppressing. On my mark, break right and proceed to extraction point Bravo." "We can't see them," Phillips yelled. "You don't need to," Rostova replied. "Mark." She began to fire. It wasn't the slow, methodical pace of before. It was a terrible, rhythmic cadence. Each shot was a death sentence delivered from over a mile away. A head exposed for a fraction of a second, a rifle barrel poking around a corner, a shadow moving where it shouldn't. She wasn't just shooting at them, she was hurting them, using lethal fire to force them out of cover and into the SEAL's line of sight. The first mercenary dropped, a neat hole punched through his helmet. The second, who turned to look, was hit mid-stride. The third tried to crawl back, behind cover, but a round skipped off the deck and tore through his leg. She was a phantom artist, painting the battlefield with death. In 90 seconds, the 10-man squad was broken, 7 dead, and the remaining 3 fleeing in terror. The path was clear. "Gamma Lead, your route is clear to Bravo. I have you covered," she said. "Copy, Overwatch." Philip's voice was filled with a new profound awe. "We're moving. Who the hell are you?" Rostova didn't answer. She was already scanning the refinery's command tower, her scope homing in on a single darkened window. She saw a flicker of movement, a heat signature. Kalen himself, watching the destruction of his forces. He felt safe, miles from the firefight, behind polarized armor-plated glass. He was wrong. Rostova adjusted her scope, calculating the refraction index of the glass. She saw the faint energy signature of its polarization field. She fired one last time. The round hit the window not in the center, but at the top right corner where the molecular structure was weakest near the frame. It didn't shatter the glass. It punched a single, small, perfectly round hole through it before continuing its journey and finding the warlord standing behind it. Her voice, a final quiet pronouncement over the command channel. "Aegis, this is Overwatch. HVT neutralized. Mission complete." Silence reigned in the Aegis Station Command Center. The chaotic red icons on the holographic display had been systematically extinguished one by the impossible shots from a single, forgotten rifle. The surviving members of Gamma Team were extracting, their voices on the comms a mix of relief, exhaustion, and stunned disbelief. They were alive because of a ghost on a ridge. Admiral Vance stood frozen, his knuckles white where he gripped the edge of the command console. His perfect, technology-driven plan had shattered at first contact. His elite SEALs had been saved from annihilation not by drones or algorithms, but by the brutally archaic art of ballistics, practiced by a woman he had dismissed as a relic. The humiliation was a cold weight in his gut. He turned slowly, his face a pale, unreadable mask, and looked at Lieutenant Commander Chen. His voice was low, but it cut through the murmuring room like a shard of glass. "Get me her full service record," he commanded. "Not the redacted fleet version they put in the mission file. I want the Onyx file, the real one, now." Chen's eyes widened. "Sir, the Onyx archives are sealed under the Centauri Accords. Access requires sector command authorization and—" "Do I look like I am asking, Lieutenant Commander?" Vance's voice was dangerously quiet. "Open it. Use my command alpha clearance." Chen swallowed hard and turned to his console. His fingers flew across the holographic interface, inputting codes and bypassing security lockouts that would have landed a lesser officer in a military prison for life. After a tense minute, a new file blinked onto the main screen. It was stark black with a single ominous heading in block letters, classification Onyx, eyes only. Subject Rostova Eva Gunnery Sergeant USMC, Service ID 734809111. Below it, the data began to scroll. It was nothing like the sanitized version they had seen before. The 10 years of instructional duties were gone, replaced by a litany of black operations so secret their very names were whispers in the intelligence community. Operation Winter Scar, the Grey Chasm Extraction, the Siege of Cygnus X-1. These were not battles. They were legends, horror stories told by grizzled veterans in hushed tones. And her name was next to every one of them. Then came her call sign, listed under her unit designation, 7th Special Reconnaissance Group, Okhotsk Ravens. Call sign, Baba Yaga. The name hung in the air of the command center. A few of the older senior NCOs in the room stiffened. It was a name from the old wars, a boogeyman used to scare enemy commanders into their bunkers, a name synonymous with impossible death from an unseen distance. They had thought it was a myth, a battlefield rumor. Then the numbers appeared on the screen. A single, stark line item. Confirmed kills. Onyx-level targets only. 274. The number was obscene. It wasn't the tally of a soldier, it was the record of a force of nature. And these weren't infantry grunts. Chen scrolled down, and the target list appeared. A redacted roll call of the Alliance's most feared enemies for 3 decades. Insurrectionist leaders, rogue admirals, terrorist masterminds, entire command staffs of enemy factions, men who had died in locked rooms, in speeding vehicles, in fortified bunkers, all officially attributed to unfortunate accidents or internal power struggles, all taken down by Baba Yaga. Vance read the final entry. A summary of her last active mission before being retired to instructor duty. It was titled, The Okhotsk Incursion. It detailed a mission where a single sniper had dismantled the entire command structure of the Kalinin separatists over 3 weeks, effectively ending a war the Alliance had been losing for 5 years. The report concluded, Subject Rostova operated alone, unsupported, after the rest of her unit was compromised and eliminated. Her actions, while saving the sector, were deemed politically untenable. Unit 7th SRG officially disbanded, its record sealed, and its surviving operative, Rostova E., reassigned to a non-combatant role to prevent public disclosure. They hadn't decommissioned her unit because they were disgraced. They had buried it because they were too terrifyingly effective. Her badge wasn't banned because it was a mark of shame. It was banned because it was a mark of a ghost, a living weapon the Alliance leadership both feared and depended on, and now wanted to pretend had never existed. Admiral Vance stared at the kill count. He read the mission summary again. He froze. The blood drained from his face, leaving behind a waxy pallid sheen. The arrogance that had defined him, the supreme confidence in his systems and his rank, crumbled into dust. He had not been dressing down a washed-up instructor. He had been condescending to a living monument of the deadliest war the Alliance had ever fought. He had threatened and insulted the Baba Yaga. The sheer, colossal weight of his own ignorance pressed down on him, and for the first time in his decorated career, Admiral Vance felt a tremor of genuine fear. The debriefing room was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with the mission. The surviving members of Gamma Team were present, their faces grim, their bodies bruised. Corporal Thorne and his friends were there, huddled in a corner, their earlier swagger completely gone. They had heard the comms chatter. They knew. The door hissed open, and Rostova entered. She was still covered in the fine red dust of Tartarus, which clung to her gear and was smeared across her face like war paint. She moved with a weary grace, her footsteps making no sound on the deck plates. As she stepped into the room, a wave of silence rolled out from her. All conversation ceased. Thorne, who had been muttering to his friends, snapped his mouth shut and stared intently at the floor, unable to meet her gaze. At the head of the long table, Admiral Vance stood up. It was a small gesture, but in the rigid hierarchy of the military, it was an earthquake. An admiral does not stand for a gunnery sergeant, ever. But he stood, and as if pulled by an invisible string, every other person in the room, SEALs, Marines, officers, and technicians, rose to their feet. It was a spontaneous, unplanned tribute, a silent, unified acknowledgement of the impossible thing she had done. Rostova stopped just inside the door, her pale eyes sweeping the room. She took in the standing men, the averted gazes, the funereal silence. Her expression did not change. She seemed neither surprised nor pleased. She simply accepted it as a change in the tactical environment. Vance cleared his throat. The sound was unnaturally loud in the quiet room. "Gunnery Sergeant," he said. His voice was different now. The sharp, condescending edge was gone, replaced by a formal, almost brittle tone. "Your report." She walked to the table, her movements economical. She did not consult a datapad or any notes. The entire battle was etched perfectly in her memory. "Overwatch position established at 0800 hours, Tartarus Standard Time," she began, her voice the same low, steady monotone as before. "Engaged hostile forces at 0917 in support of SEAL Team Gamma. Neutralized 14 confirmed hostile targets, including 3 heavy weapon emplacements, 1 enemy sniper, 1 communications jammer, 1 infantry squad, and 1 high-value target identified as Kalen." She paused. "Gamma team is secure. Mission complete." Her report was a masterpiece of understatement. She spoke of dismantling an entire fortress defense system as if she were reciting a grocery list. There was no embellishment, no hint of pride, no acknowledgement of the superhuman feat she had accomplished. Vance listened, his face a stone mask. When she finished, he just nodded slowly. He rounded the table and walked until he was standing directly in front of her. The room held its breath. They expected an apology, a commendation, some grand speech. Vance did none of those things. His pride wouldn't allow such a public reversal. Instead, he looked at her zipped-up vest, at the spot where he knew the forbidden patch was hidden. He leaned in slightly, his voice low enough that only she and those closest to them could hear. "I have just received a priority communique from SOCOM," he said, the lie smooth and practiced. "The Director of Special Operations has retroactively authorized all insignia and honors related to the Okhotsk incursion for active duty display." He met her eyes. "Effective immediately, Gunnery Sergeant." It was not an apology. It was more than that. It was a concession. It was his way of saying, "I was wrong. You were right. You have earned the right to wear your history. Wear your badge." Rostova held his gaze for a long second, her pale eyes seeming to search for something in his. Then, she gave a single curt nod of acknowledgement. She had heard him. The matter was closed. Vance nodded back, then turned to the rest of the room. "Dismissed." The room emptied in silence, the soldiers and officers filing past Rostova with a wide berth, their eyes filled with a mixture of awe, reverence, and a healthy dose of fear. They were looking at a legend, and they knew it. Late that night, long after the station had settled into its quiet, humming rhythm of the graveyard shift, Rostova was back in the armory. She was alone. The vast, silent room was her sanctuary. Her rifle was completely disassembled on the workbench, each of its 100 intricate parts laid out in perfect order on an oilcloth. She worked under the focused beam of a single utility lamp, the rest of the armory lost in shadow. She was cleaning the weapon, a ritual she had performed thousands of times. She cleaned not just the grime of battle, the corrosive red dust of Tartarus, but something deeper. She polished the soul of the machine, the steel extension of her own will. Each piece was wiped with a special solvent, inspected under a magnifying lens for microscopic fractures, and re-lubricated with a single drop of synthetic oil. Her hands, which had been so unbreakably steady during the chaos of the fight, were now gentle, almost tender. This was her only true form of prayer. After an hour of silent, meticulous work, she paused. She reached up and slowly unzipped her tack vest. She looked down at the white raven on its black field. The Admiral had given his permission, his concession, but that was irrelevant. She had never needed anyone's permission. The badge was not for them. It was for the ghosts she carried, the other ravens of the 7th SRG who had not come home from that last mission. From a small hidden pocket in her gear, she produced a small kit. It contained a spool of silver-white thread, the kind used for repairing vacuum suits, and a fine, sharp needle. She noticed that a few threads on the patch's edge had been frayed during her crawl into position on the ridge. With the precision of a surgeon, she began to reinforce the stitching, her calloused fingers guiding the needle in and out of the tough fabric with practiced ease. Each stitch was a memory, each knot a promise to the fallen. The armory door slid open with a soft hiss, breaking her concentration. Sergeant Kaito Tanaka, the young tech specialist, stood silhouetted in the doorway. He held a steaming ceramic mug in his hands. He hesitated, looking as if he were about to intrude upon a sacred ceremony. He remembered the mockery from Thorne, the Admiral's explosive anger, and the chilling competence that had followed. He was terrified of her, but also drawn by a powerful curiosity and a burgeoning respect. Rostova did not look up from her stitching. "The door's open, Sergeant," she said quietly. Emboldened, Tanaka walked softly across the deck, his rubber-soled boots making no sound. He approached the workbench and gently placed the mug down on a clear spot, well away from the rifle components. It was nutrient broth, its savory steam rising in the cool air. I ran a diagnostic on your scope's power cell while you were in debrief," he mumbled, staring at the mug instead of her. Noticed it was running cold. Figured, you might be cold too. It was a clumsy, transparent excuse. Rostova finished a final stitch and bit off the thread. She set the needle down and finally looked at the young man. She looked at his nervous eyes, his earnest expression. She saw not a soldier, but a kid, trying to bridge the vast, terrifying gap between them. Slowly, she picked up the mug. The ceramic was warm against her palms. She lifted it to her lips and took a slow sip. The broth was hot, salty, and nourishing. The warmth spread from her chest out to her tired limbs. It was the first warmth she had felt all day. She lowered the mug and looked directly at Tanaka. She offered him no words of thanks, no smile. Instead, she gave him a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, of acceptance. For Tanaka, it was like the sun breaking through the clouds. A connection had been made. He nodded back, a look of profound relief and respect washing over his face. He said nothing more, simply turned and walked out of the armory, leaving her to her quiet ritual. Rostova took another sip of the broth. She looked at her handiwork. The white raven was secure now, its silver-white stitches catching the lamplight. It looked bolder, brighter. She placed the mug down and picked up the rifle's bolt assembly, its surface now gleaming and flawless. Outside the armory's viewport, the cold, distant stars of the void glittered in the endless black sea. Her work was done for the night, but the vigil, as always, continued.